Yo, what is up guys? I'm bringing you a brand new video, and this time we're talking about evasion versus damage reduction and what you should be building on your class. I'm going to be making a comparison here between Striker and Berserker and giving you guys my opinion on what I think you guys should be building on every single class in the game. Now, the reason that I wanted to make this video is I made an evasion versus DR video in the past, but I think that it's gotten pretty outdated because I've been able to do a lot better testing in the current meta now that I have both a C20 evasion set as well as a C20 DR set, and I have narc earrings and distortion earrings, and I want to go through my findings and really give you guys a direction on what is best for your class and what are the pros and cons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation for you guys to really give you guys the differences and lead you guys in the proper direction. So, starting off, we are going to be looking at these two particular gear sets. So in a damage reduction build, we have full DR armors, which is Beg Zergon's Griffin helmet, as well as a Tet Fallen God, and we're running narc earrings at Pen, as well as a Nuver, which puts us at 327 and 409. Now, something to keep in mind here is that 401 DP is the last bracket, so between the evasion set and the DR set, the reason I like running narcs is because I can hit that final DP bracket in the DR set. Now, in evasion, we've got the Lieber's gloves, we've got the Muskin shoes, as well as 2 Pen distortions and a Kudum. These are both pretty standard full AP or full AP builds in both DR and evasion, and this is what I'm going to be comparing. Now, we're going to start off by breaking this into two different sections. The first section is going to be classes that do have evasion passives. Now, this can mean different things for different classes. So for example, on Striker, we have the Wolf's Hunger passive, which gives us 10% evasion rate, as well as Triple Flying Kick, which is an active that gives us for 10 seconds 9% evasion. Sork has different variations of the passive as well as actives. Musas and Mewas have melee evasion, and then all of these classes generally have some sort of presence of an evasion passive, which make them really decent candidates for building evasion. However, there are different pros and cons to building, and what we're going to talk about first is DR is going to be better in PvP defensively, at least until you can hit C9 evasion armors with a Dual Fallen God, in which case it becomes pretty much equal to DR when you run evasion. Even at C20, evasion versus DR in the sets that we showed earlier almost feel identical defensively against opponents. Now, I was able to test both of these sets in the game on live servers, and when I was fighting against targets that have similar endgame gear with around 872 accuracy, I found that even when I was wearing DR on Striker and I was using all my evasion bonuses, Triple Flying Kick, as well as fully buffed up, I still felt that I was just as tanky running DR as I was evasion against higher geared players. When I was fighting lower geared players though, fighting players that have around 830 accuracy or less, I did find a slight edge with running the evasion, but that being said, as soon as you get evasion debuffed by, let's say, a witch or a wizard, or maybe you're fighting a class like a sage that has a lot of accuracy, you might actually find that the DR armors will be more effective than the evasion armors. So for all intents and purposes, I think that at C20, if you're scared of running DR on your Striker or your Mystic, don't be, because in a full AP build, it really feels quite identical. And the reason why you run DR before you hit C9 evasion is because you need a certain amount of evasion before it starts being effective at all. By the time you reach C9 evasion, players will actually be missing on you. If you start building evasion earlier, you are going to be at a slight disadvantage because even low accuracy players might even hit you 100% of the time, which means that your evasion is not really doing too much for you. So evasion is definitely very much a later game build, 100%. All right, so offensively, DR is always going to be the better option, even on these classes that have evasion passives. Now, why is this? Well, Beg's Glove have 25 more accuracy than Lieber's. They also, building DR also allows you to run different crystals in your helmet. So instead of running Jin Harfias for the 40 evasion, which are almost required, or they are required for an evasion build, you can instead run, say, let's say human damage. And it also allows you to build full AP with Maneuver and Distortions if you choose, which will be much more effective than running Evasion with Maneuver. Evasion with Maneuver is basically not possible. You need to be running a Kudum when you build Evasion, and so therefore it is always going to be better offensively to be running DR, even on these classes that scale with Evasion quite well. Now, building Evasion is going to feel better in PvE. All mobs in BDO appear to have a very similar amount of accuracy to one another, whether it's been in Sakrakia, whether it's been at Olins, whether it's been at Orcs. I found that mobs have pretty low accuracy rate, which means that they will miss a lot when you run Evasion, and it almost makes it like a night and day difference sometimes when you're fighting high-end mobs. Being able to evade those hits are very, very effective compared to DR, where you are going to be getting hit quite significantly harder. So if you are only a PvE player, you're definitely incentivized to build Evasion on these select classes much more heavily than compared to DR. Evasion is also more expensive than a DR build. So when you're considering building Evasion, you're going to have to build eventually pen distortion earrings, and pen distortion earrings are like 140 bill right now, at least in NA at the time of me making this video, compared to narcs, which are only 40 bill. And so you're going to be shelling out like an extra 200 bill in most cases to build Evasion effectively. And so that is definitely factored into the cost. And the real big thing here is that you are spending that extra money, but also consider that if you do go the Evasion disto route, you are going to be having more AP with a Kudum, which means that you are going to be doing more PvE damage. So that is another, sort of consideration. If you're only a PvE player, you definitely are going to want to consider building Evasion. And then last point that I have about Evasion on Evasion classes is that it allows you to hybridize, which objectively makes you a more formidable 1v1 opponent. Now, the reason for this is, let's say a hypothetical build like this, where you have 285 AP bracket with 434 DP, you have a Centaur on, you have a Sissel on. If you can get yourself to a point where you can no longer be one comboed by your opponent, yet you're still able to one combo them, and for most cases you're able to kill the majority of DR players with 285 AP, in this particular instance, this is going to make you significantly stronger in a 1v1 scenario, because you can't die by getting caught, yet they get caught and they will die. So they have to catch you twice, which brings up your success rate of killing them by quite a large margin. So that is what's really nice about being hybrid Evasion. Whereas if you were to build DR, if you were to build Cadre rings, for example, you wouldn't notice nearly as much tankiness gain as you would by building these Evasion accessories, because of the presence of that Evasion passive. Because there's that extra evasion rate, it just mounts upon itself and makes it even more effective. Okay, so let's talk about the rest of the classes in the game here. We're going to talk about all the classes that do not have any form of Evasion passives. So these are all classes that for the most part are going to want to mostly run DR, I would say. And so first thing is that DR will be better in PvP defensively almost always. Now the reason why I say almost always is certain classes like Sage, for example, even though they don't have Evasion passive, they do have a very high amount of base evasion rate, and they also have the presence of a very good evasion offhand. And so an evasion offhand like the Rick Talisman is going to make Sage a very formidable PvP opponent in Evasion if they built full hybrid, which is going to take away from their offensive capability, but it is going to boost their defense capability quite a bit. But for example, a Warrior or a Ranger or Berserker, they're probably not going to want to build Evasion because DR is still going to feel tankier regardless of whether you hybridize or not. From personal experience, my Evasion Centaur Sissel full C20 set on my Berserker feels just as tanky, if not less, than just my normal C20 DR setup with narcs. So that is one consideration. Offensively, DR is always a better option. Just like Evasion, you get the extra accuracy, you get the crystal slots It's the cheaper option. It allows you to build full AP if you want. It gives you more flexibility to build some accuracy without, worrying about losing too much defense. DR is always going to be the better offensive option here. Building Evasion is going to feel better in PvE, but only slightly. So I've done some pretty big testing on this because I've been an Evasion Berserker for a long time, and I just recently swapped to DR. I can tell you from running Sakrakia, I can tell you from running Orcs, from running things like Olin's Golems, Evasion really feels pretty good, but so does DR. There's times where Evasion feels pretty bad because you don't evade the hits, and DR is going to be a lot more consistent. But I overall think that Evasion is better. I did do some testing where I just face tanked mobs, and always I came out on top with Evasion by a couple seconds before my HP depleted. That Evasion is definitely better at a place like Orcs, and for most purposes, Orcs is a really good comparison to pretty much everywhere because they have similar accuracy to everywhere else as far as I can tell. DR is also a cheaper build than Evasion, so this stays consistent. Of course, Narc earrings versus Distortion earrings. I think that Narcs are super effective in a DR build compared to running Distortions, so that's about 200 build cheaper. And building Evasion allows you to hybridize, but building full DR with a Cadre or two is almost identical for 1v1 performances. So this might have a little asterisk beside it. In the case of a Berserker build, in this particular case, you have 285 AP and you've got 449 DP. You're running Narcs and Cadres. This particular build would be tankier than the hybrid Evasion build that I showed you on the last slide there. And you're going to find that it's going to be a much more consistently tanky build as well, because classes that have really high accuracy, or if you get Evasion debuffed, it's really not going to matter as much. You're going to be consistently tanky in this build against every single opponent. And so I think that this is an overall better hybrid build. But once again, if I was playing on, let's say, a Sage, for example, that does have that high Evasion passive, then you might find that a hybrid Evasion build would be better. But when you're playing a Warrior, Ranger, Berserker, a Valkyrie, Dark Knight, Guardian, those types of classes that really are made mostly for DR, definitely this type of a hybrid build, you would find yourself being tankier. So my final thoughts, I wanted to keep this video short and concise, is that if you are overall building Evasion and you have Evasion passives on your class, I think that it is probably best to do so. It's almost identical to DR, even though it costs a little bit more. You are going to get better PvE performance out of it. You are going to get better hybridization if you want to get tankier, and you're also going to be just as tanky as full DR anyway. And then for a class that has damage reduction and is does not have the Evasion passives on the class, I think you almost unequivocally should build DR. It's nearly as good in PvE. It's going to be much more effective in a lot of cases in PvP, and it's also going to be the cheaper build. But the main thing that I wanted to really get across in this video is that building DR on an Evasion class is not a horrible thing. Something that people say a lot or ask me a lot is, I want to tag a striker, but I have DR, am I trolling? Not really. It's just a difference in build compared to building Evasion on a DR class is simply just a downgrade. So you can build DR on a DR class, you can build DR on an Evasion class, and it's a difference in playstyle when you build it on the Evasion class. Whereas if you build Evasion on a DR class and you build Evasion on an Evasion class, well, the Evasion on the DR class is simply just a downgrade. It is just worse. Whereas building the Evasion on the Evasion class is either equal or better. So that's my final takeaway. I hope that this was super useful to you guys. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Peace.